Hey, thank you. The first panel that we have is onto the data science manager, how we did it panel, the all about transition we are going to speak about, and we have some exciting speakers with us today already. What are we going in for? So, I mean, data is said to be the new oil, right? And data science jobs have been touted to be the sexiest of the 21st century, apparently. Today I have with me top data science managers from reputed organizations discussing on their personal journeys, do's and don'ts, importance of upskilling with right people, let's say like practitioners and right place, and importance of domain knowledge, and a lot of things around that theme we'll be discussing about. So first up, I have with me Rahul Mathur. Hi, Rahul. Um, Rahul is a data science manager at Newstar. He has about 13 years of experience, last 5 years dedicatedly in data science. He has a team of about 14 people, and they are using data in one of the most interesting area, the security and identity aspects. So he's also a freelancer in creating ML content for Jigsaw Academy, and he does some wildlife photography as well. And the second speaker I have with me, Subarna. He's a data science manager at Publicis Sapient. Hi, Subarna. He's part of their organization's core data science team. There are about 7 reportees to him, and prior to this, he was also in Sigma in analytics role. He holds a master degree as well in this area, and he does a lot of technical writing and blogging. He contributes a lot to the open source community as well. Looking forward to speaking to you, Subarna. And next up, I have Soy. Thanks again, Soy, for joining from US. Soy is a data science manager at Adobe US. So he's an ML leader and researcher, passionate about leveraging data into the product and intelligence systems. He's also an IIT Kanpur alumni. And prior to Adobe, he was with PayPal. He's also a Springboard mentor, and he has several patents as well. Looking forward to speaking to you, Soy. Okay, so let's get into the topic. The first thing that I want to speak about is that, I mean, data science, when it had its entry across the world, it created a lot of buzz. Initially, it was primarily about data science engineering teams, the engineering roles that came into picture, the data scientists that came in. And now there's suddenly a lot of data science managers, and we are seeing the necessity for the management roles in the data science, right? So that's where I want to start from. What is your view on a data science manager? Who is a data science manager, and how does a day in life look like, and his role composition looks like? I want to start this with Rahul.
Hey, thanks, Muthuraj. Hi, everyone. So this is Rahul. So towards your question around how does the data science manager on a day-to-day basis, as well as what the role entails, it's a still quite evolving role, and it's still new to a lot of the complete industry overall. We do involve in a lot of brainstorming sessions towards some of the use cases that we have got towards modeling building. Data science manager also requires to sort of collaborate across teams, right? So we would probably engage with the product guys in trying to identify what exactly are the needs on which some of the use cases have been defined. We also interact with marketing teams on identifying the differentiator in the markets towards which some of the products are going to be built upon and model efforts are going to be taken in, as well as we collaborate with the engineering teams. So overall, the entire data pipeline cannot work in silo. We work with various teams to ensure that the data is available to us. We do a lot of crunching, we do transformations, do feature engineering modeling efforts, and then effectively sort of ship it out to the engineering teams where they would probably roll out those models in the production itself, right? On a day-to-day basis, the day varies a lot. However, the data science does not move really in a stereotypical fashion, probably as engineering would have been. A lot of days we would basically do a lot of brainstorming on the work that we want to go ahead with. there could be a lot of diversions that we could see in terms of a pre-planned approach towards a model building, and there could be different ideas that can be floating around. As a manager, sometimes you have to take a veto on which ones are the most relevant, where you could go ahead and probably make those decisions as well. And at the same time, look from a collective thought process and move forward towards achieving the overall model building use case.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you, Rahul. Sai, would you like to add on?
Sure. As Rahul already covered most of the things that happens in the day-to-day life of a data science manager. Apart from that, the role of the manager also involves identifying the main value that can be derived and the low-hanging fruit in the business, and that can be solved quickly using data science, and then involve the cross-functional teams to get the data and then build the models and then present it to the business teams to see whether it can be deployed. And then also think about the technological challenges while deploying, and also if it's possible and if it will affect the business to implement the insights that the data science team provides. So all of this comes with both domain knowledge, learning, knowing more and more about the business, and also knowing what will help the business in the short term and the long term.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. So moving on, so basically, we saw that actually gave us a good idea of how a data science manager role looks like, right? So now, when you actually transitioned into a data science management role, what additional skills were required prior to your data engineering roles that you were holding, and when you had to move up to the data management roles, what additional skills that were required, and is there some technical skills that is now no more relevant? For example, maybe there is no hands-on that is required anymore, or is still hands-on also a good part of your role composition? How do you see this, the role going forward? Subarna, would you like to take on?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. When I transitioned from the data science developer to a data science manager, I think I did see a lot of change, because now my role involves a lot of client facing roles. I need to discuss all the things that Rahul and Sai discussed in the previous section. So I kind of have to do that with the client almost every day, which was probably not to that extent when I was a developer. So that is one thing which has definitely increased. And when that thing has increased, it also involved a lot of additional skills which I which I wanted, I needed. So some of that is, for example, how do you present yourself to the client, and then what sort of, how do you present the work of the team to the client, and it's even the rough pages, right? So there's a way of showcasing the things to the client, and all of this, I think, which is these skills and these things were added. While in the subtraction part, I think I don't do as much coding as I used to do before, especially in terms of the work. I mean, I do try to spend some time in doing coding, but not specifically. Now I have a team which is dedicatedly helping me in solving those problems. So it is somewhat like I'm kind of creating this solution, and I have a team which is kind of we as a team are trying to solve the whole thing. So that is one thing I have observed.
Okay, thank you. How do you see this, Rahul?
Right. I think Subarna touched upon critical points over there. One thing which you would feel different when you actually move into a manager role is probably you are now handling 2 to 3 different model building development activities. It's not just one model building development effort that you are part of. And you probably now at a 10,000 feet view where you need to make decisions at a 500 feet view, but by gaining information from your team, what you're getting at. As well as there are certain, again, stakeholder management that is required. You need to ensure that you are able to explain some of the decisions that you have taken in the model building process, as well as some of the results that come out of the model building process to the stakeholders in as lucid and as clear terms as possible. It's not always easy because a lot of tasks that we do in the modeling effort is quite obscure overall, and to make it as explainable as possible to the stakeholders so that they can get the confidence on the model's performance, they can get the confidence towards the overall data pipeline and the decisions that is making is also quite relevant. And with that also brings about a lot of thought leadership as well, right? You try to look over experimental ideas towards enhancing the solutions, you keep the overall goals in mind, and you take the best approaches and make those decisions on the way as you move along.
Okay. Yeah. And Sai, your transition is even more interesting, coming over from the software side of things, the software engineering aspects into the data science. How did that go? Would you like to share some key insights here?
Sure. So I was working on mostly tracking the web analytics in PayPal as a software engineer, and then I got the opportunity to transition to machine learning engineering at Adobe. Having an undergraduate in maths and stats definitely helped to pick up the topics, and also doing a lot of Kaggle competitions and reading up on the books and trying out as many models as possible. And during the 2013 and 14, the machine learning is getting more and more popular because of the use cases it was able to solve, and the deep learning has just started gaining traction because of all the advancements it has seen. So I saw it as a good opportunity to get into the field, and so far it has been great. So I would advise anyone moving such transition to just pick up a good course, or try doing some projects in the machine learning and see how much improvement you are being able to do for the objective, and then you can pick up some good projects in your future jobs.
Perfect. That's actually a very good segue into a lot of participants, what they are looking forward to. So what are the upskilling that is required in this area? So what are some of the top skills, and to gain those skills, what are some of the upskilling that is required in this area, Subarna?
Yeah, thank you. So some of the upskilling which is definitely required is being being a learner itself. Like it's a never ending process, especially in data science. As we all know, that data science field is not exactly where IT is, if you look at, right? So it is kind of evolving role. And as Rahul also mentioned, that a lot of companies, they are still trying to define what their managers will do, or what their data science specialist will do, and expert will do, and all of that, right? So it kind of varies, that the role is kind of still evolving. So with this evolution, I think it is very necessary to kind of keep yourself savvy. What do I mean by that is, I'm sure if anyone who wants to jump into this data science field, they will start learning about different algorithms. They will probably start learning Python, which is the most popular language anyways, right? They will also start about, even especially in terms of algorithm, they will start learning about linear regression, right, and all of that. But one thing which they have to keep an open mind is that the whole system is evolving, right? So what that means is that every day there is some new algorithm that is coming up, and if we don't know that, then we will also not be able to tell that to the client, or whatever solution we are trying to solve, right? So it is very necessary that as and when you are learning things, you not only you look back, you also look forward, right? So you see that what are the algorithms which were pretty popular, which you should learn, which you definitely should learn. And at the same time, you should also read out, there are so many websites which you can read papers on. You can see specific use cases, how the companies are trying to solve it, and I think everyone will agree with me that in data science, there's, for any sort of problem, there's not one solution, right? So it's like an open field. Anyone can come up with their own solution. So maybe when you read all of these use cases, is try to formulate your viewpoints, right? If you would try to solve it, then how will you do it, right? And while doing so, you will realize that you will probably need this kind of tool, which is maybe deep learning, right? So you need to have that expertise to solve the problem using deep learning, or you might want to solve it using machine learning, which is the traditional methods people are using, right? So all of this you need to keep an open mind, and with that I think you should move forward learning about data science.
Okay, Rahul, would you like to add on to the skills and the upskilling that is required?
Right. I think Subarna very well captured most of the points. A couple of things that I would probably say from the time that sort of the transition, at least for me, happened about 4 to 5 years ago to now. The overall processes have matured a lot. So similarly, in most of the organizations now are probably 2 to 3 years minimum old with their data science capabilities. And so they are also specializing in the areas, they know what they are looking for in a data scientist when they are onboarding of the team. I would probably recommend anybody who is now trying to make their way into a data science to also sort of specialize themselves in one of the key aspects. So it can be towards computer vision, it can be towards natural language processing, it can be towards imbalancing techniques, or a lot of other use cases that are probably prevalent out there. And try and dig deep and specialize your area in one aspect, and then try and pick up a domain on which those particular techniques are applied more. And then you are probably a better fit to that organization as well when you're trying to sort of apply and trying to actually look at. The other great way which I always believe is organically trying to move within your organization towards the opportunities which are towards the data science side, because your career transition journey is also going to be reflective on how a firm is transitioning towards the data science side. And if your firm is on the verge of making that transition, or they are already in that transition, then you probably have a good sort of exposure over there, and a good place right now to move within the organization and make those movements.
Okay, okay. That's an interesting viewpoint. So now, Sai, a question to you. So basically, I hear from Subarna and Rahul, when we talk about the skills, there is two sets of things emerging, right? So one is the maths and the statistical concepts itself, and the other is the tools and the technology that is around it. But the, while how do you see the upskilling between these two areas? Because the whole technology area is keep evolving. So, for example, Subarna did claim that Python is the language as of today, right? So, and that's the case as well. It is the most powerful language a tool that is out there, but tomorrow Python and R could also be replaced by another tool. So the technology area is evolving. So how do you categorize these skills, and where should the newcomers into data science area, where should they prioritize their learning?
Sure. So the data science can be broadly categorized into two parts, where one is involving definitely the statistical and the analysis and the math part. And the second part could be the software and the deployment, which is more under the machine learning. And the second one is just the data analysis and the SQL part, which is more towards the business analyst part. So different companies have data science managers under one of these roles, where sometimes the software is the core competency along with the math and stat part, or sometimes the SQL and the business and the data analysis is the core competency, and sometimes a mix of the both. So depending on what's your next role is looking for, you would want to learn on one of these skills. I would say, I mean, I don't see Python and R would still be the major tools for machine learning, at least for prototyping and quick demos and everything in the near future. Maybe for deploying, people might go to a bigger ones like C++ or Scala or Java or anything. But even the advanced TensorFlow is written in Python, so because it's becoming the next go-to language for all the machine learning frameworks. So I would strongly advise to get familiar with Python, at least for the industry in the next few years. It's still going to be there.
Okay, perfect. Yep. Thank you for that. So how do you? I mean, these are still the different skills that we talked about. Now there is also a domain element to all of this. Because in each of the organizations, they are looking to apply data for a specific domain, for a specific industry, and there look to be a lot of differences between each of these industries and domain. So how much of importance the organizations are giving to domain knowledge when they are hiring a data science leader, and how do you see that?
Uh, so when we first join a team, then definitely we need some information about the domain and how the business works and what's the data available. Like some difficult problems need certain amounts of data, and the data scientist or the data scientist manager should generally first find out what are the different amount of data that is already available and what could be even gathered from different data sources. Once he gets to know that, then he will be able to know what kind of problems could be solved with the data available. And this definitely involves talking to different business teams and understanding what are their pain points and how they are currently trying to solve it, and how data scientists can use the data to or leverage data along with the domain knowledge to answer their problems, and in a more and that too in a much more realistic way. And at the end of the day, those solutions should also be able to be deployed in the real world, and the company should see a value and not just end up in the prototype or to the presentation phase.
Okay. Okay. Subarna, to you, to continue from here. So basically, let's say if I'm getting into the data science role, so the two segments that we talked about, the let's say first to get upskilled on the maths and statistics side, and the tool side. Now that for the domain piece, can I say the newcomers into the data science area, can they rely on the subject matter experts by speaking to the business and stakeholders? Can they get this piece covered, or do you see a need that they should also be significantly aware about that specific domain?
Right. So I think, we have to also look at from this perspective where exactly this person wants to get into this data science field. I mean, if he wants to get into the field, I think it would be most likely an entry level job, right? Which is maybe associate data scientist, right? Or a junior data scientist. While having, as I said, when you join, as much as your skill is supposed to be, in terms of coding, in terms of the domain itself, data science, like the different algorithms and etc. But you also need to at least understand some of the jargons regarding that field, right? So I think it is very essential for, especially when you are joining a company, you should do some research on that company, that what sort of, what sort of clients they are catering to, or what sort of domain that company is operating, right? Because what happens, and this especially I also struggled a lot when I joined Fidelity, is because Fidelity is a typical financial company, right? And that time I did not have enough resources to read about data science in finance. It was quite old, right? But now what I'm trying to say is, now there are so many resources, so many case studies. People are writing blogs almost every day. There are sites like medium.com. People are sharing their experiences, the use cases they have done in finance and all of that, right? So my only suggestion, and I think it is the first and foremost suggestion for people who wants to get into this field, is you need to, there are three, it's a three-dimension problem. It's not only algorithms, it's not only programming, but the domain and the having the overview of what exactly these terms mean, especially connecting to, when you are connecting to a domain to a data science field, then how do you connect it? That information you should also have, and it is equally important, right? So yeah, so those are my thoughts in this area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I get it right, so a person can come in, and then he can, by speaking to the subject matter experts, by working in that area, going through the jargons, he can still upskill himself into the domain itself, right?
Well, yeah, yes, he can to some extent, but having those kind of knowledges beforehand also helps, especially when you are competing with other people, and you are expecting that when other people have already some idea about, about these terms and everything. Especially I will say there are domains like, pharma, domains like retail, and finance. So they have their specific set of jargons, the words that they use on a day-to-day basis. And I think when you explore these kind of case studies, which is already readily available online, then you will kind of get an idea what does those mean, and that will definitely help you when you get into a job. So when you get into a job, and then when you are speaking to SME, you already will have some idea about what the SME is speaking about, because that can also be a challenging, because when a SME is talking to you, he would also imagine that probably this much you should already know, right? So having that base always helps.
Perfect. Perfect. So Rahul, to you here. So basically, you and your team has been working on data science with the security and the identity area, right? So now, if you had been hiring, and let's say there's a person who is coming in with amazing data science skills, he has the required data knowledge, the data thinking, and the tools that is required, but he has no idea about the security identity area. Would you still consider him? What would be your viewpoints there?
Yeah, so I think, again, as the guys have already mentioned, now data science has now spread out to various domains. It's probably, every firm to an extent specializes in some of the domains, unless and until it is catering to various clients of, let's say, a retail, a risk, security, and all the others. So it probably is not feasible for everyone to have that experience in it. What we typically look for is the kind of techniques that probably we have used from a data science side. Have an individual worked on those particular aspects or not, right? For instance, let's say if you're talking about retail, you probably have recommendation systems or market basket analysis as the benchmark over which somebody should have an experience. For anyone to get really interested about this CVs and sort of shortlist them as well. Similarly, working in security or working in risk side where I've been mostly involved in, we look for dealing with class imbalances problems in the data sets, trying to identify explainability a lot in the problems that we are solving it as well. Also, security side requires working with a lot of logs data. So you would probably have time series problem, which if you have an experience in the past of you or you've done projects in which you have basically your own interest in, then that definitely helps. So not necessarily a domain specific knowledge. We expect that to be given to you over your training period overall, but definitely working on techniques and tools which are very relevant to those domains. If you have an experience on those aspects, that definitely helps and counts.
Similar and relevant methods and the areas that they have worked on would be helping. Okay, okay, that's very interesting. Thank you. Extending on there, as we started about the hiring aspects, Subarna, do you see any typical mistakes or any typical issues that when the candidates are applying for the role, for the data science role, are they doing something that could have been easily avoided? Do you see it repeatedly happening, any of this?
Yeah, so honestly, what I'm going to say, it has improved. It wasn't the same case earlier, but I think what a typical mistake which a lot of people who try to get into this field, especially from some other field, is they try to showcase something which they have done, but they have not done that before, right? So that is something you should avoid unless and until you have actually done it. You have spent time in solving a use case, then only you should put that in your CV, right? So I think a lot of people try to if for example recommendation system, they will probably read a couple of articles on recommendation system, and without even actually doing it, they'll come and put that in their CV. That could be your biggest mistake, especially if you are going to interview with someone who has been in this field for like so many years. It is very easily detectable,
An
right?
expert can easily dig that out, right?
Very very
Yeah,
easy. Yes, that's
yeah.
correct. So I think you should definitely avoid that, and be honest, be loyal to yourself. If you have gone through, even if you have studied enough, and if you have explored all of these algorithms, you have read about these things, mentioning that can also help you, rather than putting something which you have not done, right? So that will be my 16 cent advice to everyone.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So Rahul, actually, for those who are transitioning into this area, right? So, and now, because earlier there was a time that it was probably a slightly easier because there was a lot of demand, but the supply was lesser, right? So, as long as you had that passion, a lot of people were able to transition. But now that the supply side has also increased, and there is a steady pool of students coming up and applying for these roles, extending from what Subarna said, they cannot actually also create something and so that, this is what they cannot fakely claim that this is what I have. But at the same time, they have to show something, but they don't have a previous role where they have done these projects. So they have to create some portfolios here. So what are some of the ways how a newcomer in this area can create a portfolio for himself?
Right. It's actually a very relevant problem, right? Because everybody says, where do we get that experience from that you're looking for us to be considered in the firm that you are? So I think there are, as I think Sai touched upon, there are a lot of open source based projects. There are a lot of competitions which are very relevant and that test your skills thoroughly in the areas that you have done. Whether it's Kaggle or in India, there are plenty of sites that actually provide us with those. Try your experience over there. If you're trying to solve a problem and you are thorough and deep in it, it will show in the approach that you have taken. It will show in the CV that you built upon it. And also look over from a lot of research papers. Now in the firms, we try and study research papers and we try and implement them as part of our innovative solutions in the problem stack. If you have gone ahead and done something like that, it's good. A lot of people think that probably doing certifications or probably just having some sort of a data science based degree over there is going to solve problem. That shows intent, that shows that you are interested in the field. That does not nearly necessarily translate into knowledge that you probably are having. And those sort of knowledge you gain by trying out different modeling solutions yourselves, trying and deep diving on those solutions as well, because it will show how well have you actually thought over a problem statement as well. Do not fake it. It's very easy. Somebody who's probably a new to it and has gone and has all the possibly jargons in the CV, it's very clearly visible, right? People are preparing their CVs to be captured by the bots, but eventually it's a human being who's going to sort of interview at the end of it. So it will be captured somewhere over there. So as Subarna also mentioned, be honest with your CV and try and solve problems and be thorough in it. So I think those things definitely help and are always appreciated by us when we hire teams.
Perfect. So your take on these things, Sai. So how can someone create a portfolio? And you have been also a speaker in many conferences and events, right? And there are many events also which is on the lines of where you can create, submit your open challenges, etc. So how much of these are recognized by the organizations, and what are some of the ways how someone can create a portfolio?
Sure. So Rahul already covered for the people who are entering the data science field for the first time, reading up by reading the books or online courses is definitely helpful. But at the end, having the practical experience matters. So pick up some data either from different data sources or online data available, or even the Kaggle has a lot of data sources that they can pick up and do different analysis, and they can put it on their GitHub and publish it, and they can also put it on their resume. Similarly, there are many Kaggle competitions, and there are forums where people discuss a lot, and participating in those forums and then contributing and then submitting their own results will also improve their learning curve, and they can definitely add it on the resume, like how top coders or HackerRank used to be for software engineering. Kaggle is for machine learning, etc. And on the other end of the spectrum, if you are aiming for a more ML heavy role, then it's required that you have either publications in top machine learning conferences like KDD. And again, depending on the domain that you are entering, if it's computer vision, then you need to have research papers in the computer vision conferences, and similarly the NLP or general machine learning and similar.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So now that we have heard Kaggle a few times already, and that's a very important aspect for for all those who are newcomers in here to go and visit that as well. Let me take a question from Kaggle itself. In a recent survey from Kaggle on data science issues that the teams have been facing, one of the top 3 issue is actually the stakeholder management and the business buy-in for the solutions that the data teams are building, right? So how do you see these, Rahul? So let's say if your team is building something, and do you have issues in getting business buy-in, or are you starting the other way around? From the business there is a request, and hence you are always in safe hands. How do you see that whole chemistry between the business and the data science teams, and why do you think that this has been a top industry problem?
Right. So I'll probably tell from my experience in the product firms that we have been part of. So typically, there is always a problem statement that is being tried to solve, right? And we look at the market differentiators probably with that we can bring about from an overall data perspective. So at the senior executive level, there's always a thought process that we should look at building such solutions that will give us that sort of an edge, or that will bring us probably at parity with the market overall. However, on conceptualizing those solutions and probably sort of showcasing those solutions, it is a challenge, because traditionally data-driven based decisions has not been part of a firm's DNA. It has recently come into place as well. And based upon that, we have now started making more and more decisions as we go along that. So from taking any sort of thought process that we have towards model building and trying to put across those models with the performances that are being showcased upon, it becomes a lot of, and it becomes a data science manager's basically responsibility as well to ensure that it's explained to the stakeholders in the most easiest format way, so that they can see where we have taken the signals and the core decision power towards the model, and explain why it would be fruitful under various scenarios, and how it will basically be a good leverage to the product and eventually to the clients overall. So that responsibility is something that has to be done a lot. I think as a part of data science team, a lot of documentation, a lot of presentation, and in a very innovative manner, because you're talking of complex solutions over here that can be explained in as simple way as possible. And so that it captures and it strikes a chord with the upper senior management as well, so that they can take it eventually and take decisions based upon those solutions.
Perfect. Perfect. So Subarna, to you here. So basically, even in my experience, when I've been seeing that some of the data scientists are like, they're perfect techies and geeks, right? So they can actually solve, they know their data really well. They have actually a very great idea. But when it comes to conveying that value proposition and making sure that the business understands why they should invest in that area, they're typically seeming to be lacking, right? So what do you think is missing here? Should they also be having storytelling as an essential skill for them? What are some of the things that you would advise here?
Right. So I would like to address this in two ways, right? So it is, you have to understand that, again, I'm going to connect to the previous thing which I said, is that this field is evolving, right? So when it is evolving, it is also evolving from a business perspective. So the people who are in the business side, who we call stakeholders, and who are, handling all the business decisions and everything, they are also not learned enough about data science. So they probably don't have enough idea about how these things work. So even if you tell them that I built a forecasting system which will give you this forecast and everything, so to them it will still sound like a magic, right? So how exactly it is supposed to be addressed is, the business should also invest in educating their own business people to give them learnings about data science. This is very crucial because I'm also having this problem firsthand. So it is very, very necessary. On the other hand, I think that's the fourth dimension of learning which one should focus on. So programming, algorithms, use cases, and presentation, right? So the storyboarding is very, very necessary, right? It is very essential. Whenever you are trying to do something with the data, you have to make a lot of decisions to think about how will I present this, right? I think when you touched upon this geek part, right? So one of the things people don't consider when they are trying to tell their story about the data is they just put everything, right? So they want to tell everything that they found in the data. That is too much information for business, right? So you have to be cautious of the fact, cognizant of this fact, that it is, you want to show only what is super duper interesting, right? You don't want to tell everything. And that is one typical mistake people do, I have noticed in the past, right? So focus on the things that you want to present, and focus on the things what the audience want to listen, right? And another crucial factor that you want to consider here is to whom you are presenting, right? Because to a C-level person, he probably doesn't even have to go through more than one slide, right? Not even more than one line. So how do you compress all of your findings to one line? That is also not an easy task, because you have so much of information with you. But what is the most relevant information to a C-level person is something which is difficult to figure out, and same goes for the other person. So know your audience and know how do you want to present yourself. So give a lot of time in thinking about how will you upskill yourself in these areas. There are a lot of courses on how to do storyboarding. There are some good books as well. I'll probably post the names of those books in that
That will help.
LinkedIn.
Yes.
Yeah. So that will definitely give you an idea that how your thought process should be, right? How you should proceed with solving a data science problem, and how do you present your findings to a exec. Yeah.
Yeah, I can completely relate it to their, things like, when the data scientist actually tries to put all the different models, the sequence of models that they used, and the findings from each of these. When the real finding for the business is that the insight that has come out, when it becomes an overload of information with all the different model names and the jargons, business people sort of zooms out of the discussions, right? Yeah. So question to you here, Sai. So when you have to do such a presentation, what are some of the best practices that you are taking on, in addition to what Rahul and Subarna they have already covered a lot? Possibly there is, there is some specific tips and tricks that you have seen it working, and how you have been able to make your way with the business.
Sure. Subarna raised some good points. So the first I would like to say is definitely know your audience. So the level of details and the presentation differs a lot when you are presenting to the executives compared to the customers, compared to the team or the cross-functional team or your managers, etc. So if you are presenting to external customers, they're like pitching your marketing solutions, like the main focus should be on the value that is being derived from the models rather than explaining the models, because I mean interpretability of the models helps rather than having it as a black box model, because most customers do not want to see their business decisions coming through a black box, especially when they want it to be data driven. So they prefer mostly the interpretable models where they see some of the features driving the business decisions. So having those crystal clearly laid out will definitely help. And if it's again if you are showing again to executives or customers, also show the value that they will achieve by following the insights that come out of these models, because just presenting the findings are not much of a help at the end. You should also let the customers know what they should do and how to use these uh, data science solutions so that they achieve value in their business. So doing that extra last mile is definitely helpful. And finally, just always have a story around what's the data that you used, and what are the assumptions behind the models, and are the results valid under all the scenarios, and under what situations can the results be applied, and what's the expected output if the customer uses this solutions. So all these things has to be presented, and depending on the audience they have.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I think we can, with that, a lot of great insights from you guys, and with that, let's now get into the live questions from the community. So I will take one of that question, and then I would request you, all three of you, to also answer back in the community in the LinkedIn post. That will help a lot of folks out in the community. And definitely, the links that you mentioned, the resources that you had mentioned during the conversation, all of that will be helping a lot for the community as well. So one question from the audience, from Sonal. So which data science tools are easy to learn considering its learning curves? So if consider a starter in this area, a fresh person, and where can they start it from? Rahul, do you want to take this?
Yeah, sure. I think Python is the Bible right now that you should probably refer to when thinking about most of the data science-based work. Even in the deep learning side now, as I mentioned, there's TensorFlow, which is Python written, or PyTorch, which is Python written. You can always start learning from Python if you're not aware of the language. Learn about the different machine learning libraries that are brought along with it. We use that to backtrack and look at going more deeper into the statistics side from a Python-based sort of learning over there. So you have scikit, you have different libraries that are present over there, which can basically be helpful. There are tons and tons of material now online and open source structured learning where you can find basic use cases and you can have those model building activities over there. You can always take that as a starting initial point and dwell deeper and deeper into as your interest builds over there. Try to go as thorough as possible. Look towards as much of the mathematical side, statistical side that you can. A lot of people tend to ignore that, which should not be, because remember that even though these libraries are encapsulating all the complex underlying linear algebra or all the other operations, you would require some time. Those transformations while building models, you will require some time to actually apply those techniques in real time to actually gain some meaningful sort of optimizations or performances from these models. So I think way to go is Python. There is Google Colab now, which is there. There are a lot of open source competitions. We've already spoken a lot about them. Try your hands on that. Most of them are Pythonic based, and then they obviously support R as well. And yeah, take it from there, and slow by slow you will find your journey going along there.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, Rahul. And one more question that we have up here is basically, let's say if you're evaluating a business case and you have to give a recommendation of, the tools to be used or the framework to be used in that case, what are some of the approach that you would take? What would be your approach to decide or to evaluate the tool or a service that is right for the given business case? Would you like to take up, Subarna?
Right. I think it is very, at the start of the use case only, you have to
Yes.
understand that what exactly, which phase that use case is in. What I mean by that there is POV, there is POC, there is a minimal viable product, and then you have a project rollout, right? So all of these phases, I think it is very necessary to consider which phase are you in, because for example, if you are in POC, right? So you just want to make sure that whatever your idea is, it is kind of giving some solution, right? It is a working idea. So for that, all you need to do is some exploration, maybe a small model which can give you some output, and you want to present your output that, boss, I have think about it, I've thought about it, this is my idea, and this is how the solution looks like, right? So in that, you don't need to consider much. You just run with Python a very small subset of the data which can get your job done, and you just move ahead. While when you are doing a MVP, right? So which is basically you are trying to build a minimal viable product. For example, in a website, you want to deploy a recommendation engine, right? So in that case, you might want to consider a lot of things when you're looking at what tools you want to use. You need to consider the fact that there can be an issue of scalability, there can be issue of robustness, there can be issues of portability, right? So all of these things, it's very, very necessary to consider them at the start of the project, because these are kind of the founding pillars of your use case, if you will, right? So if any of these things, if you make a wrong decision, then you might have to go back and start all over again, right? For example, if you know that you are going to work on a image vision case, right? For example, so images typically are stored in huge amounts of databases, right? So it's a big database, right? So for that, you might want to need a system which can easily process big amounts of data, the big data it can process, right? So in that case, maybe you want to explore Spark, and you want to see that if that whatever system you are using, that has a distributed computing capability or not, and things like this, right? So I think a lot of people who start with a use case, they probably don't think that much when they about the tools and all. They just say that, let's start with whatever we have. That can be a mistake in future. So yeah, these are my thoughts.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. So the initial architecture, design decisions that the team is making is very important, considering, how the solution is going to come up in the future, right? Okay. So, but how in terms of if the requirement itself is evolving, let's say the solution is later on figuring out that there has also to be included an image processing. If the business requirement itself is evolving, would that often mean that the whole thing has to be redesigned, or how do you see those things?
Right. So I think it is generally that's not the case, especially when you are building a product. There can be several components of the product. So as you mentioned, that if there is a requirement from business that we have to include some vision component, so then it's a different component, right? So it's a different, and for that you might want to use a set of tools which are different than your previous set of tools which you are using, right? So it can be you probably want to keep your system in such a way where everything is in containerized format. So nowadays, I don't know if Docker is something which is very much in use, right? So Docker and Kubernetes and all of this. So where you can, deploy your specific components, specific individual solutions, rather than all of it, all the things in one place, right? So in that way, you are flexible, you are portable, and you are very easily, you can plug and play with anything you want, right? So that kind of thing will definitely help.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Subarna. One last question to you, Sai. This is basically on the data science manager role itself. How much of it is a blend of engineering and services? How much of hands-on experience is required versus the business-facing and the client-facing role that is required? So, if you have to, let's say, which is a bigger part of the role?
So it depends on the companies defining the data science role. At least in Bay Area, some companies have defined the data science as somebody who does need to have even the software engineering capabilities, but it's recently being changed to machine learning engineer. So if the data is large, then definitely they need to know the like tools like Spark, which have the distributed processing, and similarly TensorFlow if for and running on distributed GPUs, and most of it involves engineering. But if you have good data engineering teams in your company who will do all the feature engineering for you or all the data processing, then you can just focus on uh, taking the features to the model, building the model, and then presenting the insights. So depending on whether the data engineering team is helping you with the processing, you need to have those skills.
Perfect. Okay. Okay. So thanks a lot, Rahul, again, Sai again, and it's been a great pleasure speaking with you all, Rahul, Sai, and Subarna. A lot of insights, very, very helpful for anyone who is looking to transition into this area. I think they would have found this session immensely useful. Thanks a lot for sharing from your personal experience how you actually went ahead and did each of these aspects, right? So that would be an inspiration for a lot of them to come into this area as well.